he was a bandit who became a general, a fugitive who became a governor, and get this, a revolutionary who became a movie star. We're talking about Pancho Villa, one of the most electric and, honestly, contradictory figures of the 20th century. This is the story of how one man could be seen as both a heroic liberator and a ruthless killer. And that's really the big question, isn't it? How does a guy born into poverty, a fugitive from the law, transform himself into the legendary Centaur of the North? This is the journey of a man who would go on to command one of the biggest revolutionary armies in the Americas and become a powerful symbol of Mexican resistance. So to understand the man, you've got to understand the world he came from. He was born Doroteo Arango into the super harsh reality of Mexico's hacienda system. His father died when he was just 12, forcing him to become the man of the house way too soon. Then, at 17, the moment that changes everything, he defends his sister from an assault by shooting the hacienda owner. And just like that, he's on the run. He takes on a new name, Francisco Villa. And for the next 16 years, he lives as an outlaw in the mountains. But Villa's time as a fugitive wasn't just about hiding out. It was a period of transformation. This is where his personal fight against the system starts to become something much, much bigger. You see, during those years, Villa became what historians call a social bandit. He'd rustle cattle, he'd rob the wealthy landowners. But here's the key part. He often shared the spoils with the poor peasants. This is where he starts building this massive reputation as a kind of Robin Hood, a folk hero who was on the side of the little guy against the elites. The real turning point comes in 1910. A political organizer named Abraham Gonzalez sees Villa's potential. He sees the charisma, the loyalty he commands from the people, and he convinces him to join the revolution against the dictator Porfirio Diaz. For Villa, this made perfect sense. As he famously said, it wasn't a change of occupation, just a change of title. He was already fighting the system. Now he was just going to do it on a national stage. And with that, Pancho Villa just explodes onto the national scene. He's not just a guerrilla fighter anymore. He becomes this brilliant general, and for a short but really radical period, a governor who tries to build a whole new society from the ground up. Now, when you think of Villa's legendary División del Norte, the Division of the North, don't picture some ragtag group of rebels. No way. At its peak, this was a sophisticated, modern army. Villa was a true innovator who totally understood how to wage a 20th century war. Let's just look at some of his key innovations. First off, he took over Mexico's railroads to move his troops and supplies at incredible speeds. It was a logistical game changer. Then he created the Servicio Sanitario, literally a hospital on a train. It was the first of its kind in Mexico, and it massively boosted morale and survival rates. And of course, he had his elite cavalry, Los Dorados, the Golden Ones, who served as this devastating shock force in battle. So after a string of just stunning victories, Villa finds himself the provisional governor of the huge state of Chihuahua. Now, it only lasted for about a month, but in that time, he gave everyone a wild preview of what a Mexico run by him might actually look like. He moved at lightning speed. He seized huge estates from the rich to fund his government. He established almost 100 new schools for the poor. He slashed the prices on stuff like beef and milk. But, and this is a big but, it wasn't all perfect. He also printed his own money, which basically caused runaway inflation, making the currency pretty much worthless. So, good intentions, but with some pretty unstable economic results. So, Villa's a general, he is a governor. What's next? Well, naturally, fighting a public relations war. And his weapon of choice? You're not going to believe it. The Hollywood movie camera. In 1914, Villa signed a contract with an American film company. They gave him a $25,000 advance, an absolute fortune back then, plus a cut of the profits. In exchange, they got exclusive rights to film his battles. He knew that American public opinion was the key to getting weapons and support. The terms of this deal were just wild. Villa would literally delay his attacks until the morning light was perfect for the cameras. The film company gave him a slick new uniform because his actual one wasn't heroic enough. And the movie they made completely rewrote his backstory, saying he was a wealthy rancher to make him more palatable to American audiences. It was pure propaganda, and Villa was in on the whole thing. But all the Hollywood magic in the world couldn't stop what was coming. In April 1915, at the Battle of Celaya, Villa's famous cavalry charges went up against his rivals' modern tactics. We're talking trench warfare, barbed wire, and machine guns. It was old-school tactics versus new-school technology. And the result was an absolute slaughter. The División del Norte was decimated, and Villa's time as a major military power was pretty much over. Defeated and retreating, Villa now enters the most desperate and maybe most legendary phase of his career. He felt completely betrayed by the United States, which had started backing his enemy. So he decided to do something unthinkable. He took the war onto American soil. In March of 1916, Villa led his men across the border and attacked the small town of Columbus, New Mexico. His reasons were complicated. He desperately needed supplies, sure, but he also wanted revenge against the U.S. for backing his rival, and he was probably hoping to provoke an American invasion that would embarrass the Mexican government. Well, the raid caused an uproar. President Wilson sent over 10,000 troops, led by General Pershing, on what they called the punitive expedition to capture Villa. It was a total David versus Goliath situation. The U.S. Army brought airplanes and trucks into combat for the first time, but Villa, he had the home field advantage. He knew the terrain better than anyone, and he had the total support of the local people who warned him about every American move. For nearly a year, he made the technologically superior U.S. military look absolutely foolish. Pershing's expedition eventually went home, totally empty-handed. And it's in this final chapter that we see how the man, even in defeat, completes his transformation into an immortal myth. So, in 1920, Villa finally negotiates a peace deal. He's given a huge hacienda, he retires. You'd think the story ends there. But nope, he was still too powerful, too popular. The new government was terrified that he could rally the people and make a comeback. So on July 20th, 1923, they set a trap, ambushing his car in a hail of bullets. But killing the man only made the legend stronger. And the main way that legend spread was through something called the corrido. You have to remember, in a largely illiterate society, these narrative folk songs were the people's news source. They told the stories of the revolution, they celebrated the heroes, and they preserved history from the ground up. And the corridos completely reframed his story. That devastating military loss at Celaya, totally forgotten. But him running circles around the entire U.S. Army for 10 months, that became the main event. In the songs, his tactical retreat wasn't a failure at all. It was the ultimate victory of a clever Mexican hero outsmarting the powerful American invaders. The myth was officially set in stone. Which brings us right back to the start. So, who was Pancho Villa? Was he a social Robin Hood, a champion for the poor fighting for justice? Or was he a brutal monster, a warlord responsible for untold violence? The truth is, he was both. He was all of the violent, chaotic, and idealistic contradictions of the revolution wrapped up in one person. And it's that complexity that makes his story so powerful, a legend forged in fire that still defines so much about Mexico, even a century later.